welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm your host, Tiffanie Devan, and I'm happy to have back at the Access Corner my fellow Access partner, Ron Felder. Ron, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me.
Absolutely. And Ron and I are going to talk to everyone about being FAFSA ready, or are you ready for the 2024-2025 FAFSA application, free application for federal student aid. As many know, and some may not be aware, the FAFSA application generally opens up October 1st of every year for the upcoming school year. Well, this year it's a little bit different. FAFSA is actually going to be delayed and will not open until December 2023 for those who are going to complete the 2024-2025 FAFSA application. But we don't want you to just sit idly there waiting around for it to happen. We have some tips to kind of get you through and help you be prepared so that when it does open up, you're ready. So Ron, let's get started and let's talk about the Federal Student Aid ID account or FSA ID account. Let's tell some of our listeners things that they need to be prepared for when completing it.
Well, Tiffany, that is a great segue to actually explaining what the FSA ID, Student Aid ID is. In order to complete the application or even to start the FAFSA application, which is the free application for federal student aid, you have to have a FSA ID or Student Aid ID. You first need to make sure that you have the correct Social Security number that's on your Social Security card as of date that can reflect on its ID, as well as the exact name that's on the card has to go onto your FAFSA ID. So a lot of folks assume that they kind of know, or a lot of students assume that they know their Social Security numbers and they only know their last 4 digits. No, they have to know the full 9-digit Social Security number. Also, you also should be using a professional email address. Gmail is preferable, but if you want to use iCloud or Yahoo or Hotmail, however you feel, you have that's your choice and that's your option. However, you want to make sure that you definitely stay away from using your as a student, using your high school email address, because it will not be valid after you graduate high school. Now, we have some different verbiage this year. So depending on who your contributor is selected, they will have to also have a FAFSA ID as well. Now, as you go into the completing the FAFSA and you're going through the FAFSA wizard, your FAFSA wizard will determine who or which contributor will have to go on the child's FAFSA form. However, in both cases, both contributor and student should have a FAFSA ID. Tiffany?
Good point. So let's back up just for a few minutes so that we can make sure everyone is aware. Contributor is a new term for this 24-25 FAFSA application. So a contributor is anyone whose information is required to be placed on the FAFSA form along with the students. Now, from most, I can say you can switch the word out with required parent, or required contributor. But keep in mind, contributor will be required. And like you said, it will let everyone know who is actually going to be required. So key things for student FSA ID is important. You can get that. You can get it now. You will not be able to complete the FAFSA or even start it as you were in the past without that FSA ID. That applies to the student. That applies to the contributor / parent. It's also recommended that you complete this at least 2 to 4 days before the FAFSA opens, because it has to go through a verification process. So if the information if you are not verified as the authentic person, and again, make sure that however your name appears with the Social Security Administration, make sure that your name is spelled that way, as well as making sure that the Social Security numbers are accurate. Now, in addition to that, in addition to having the FSA IDs, there's also some more information that folks generally need to have handy. We'll start out with the income information. And we were talking about that too, Ron. So you want to give them a little information.
So this year, you will be using your 2022 IRS tax documentation. You cannot use your 21 or your 23. So if while we have this time to kind of retrieve our information, because we still don't have an exact date of when the FAFSA will come out. They still are just saying it will be, it's coming out December. If you need to reach back out to your tax preparers, H&R Block, or your accountant, or whoever did your taxes, you want to make sure that you at least have that documentation in front of you. Just verify make sure all information is correct, but you are using your 2022 IRS tax documentation this year for this upcoming FAFSA.
Okay. Absolutely. And another thing to keep in mind, hopefully most folks will be able to go out and use the IRS's direct data exchange, which takes the place for the IRS data retrieval tool in the past. So if they have that, most of the information that is found on their tax information will be transferred directly in. But again, like you said, it's good to still have that information handy just in case it is needed. In addition to that, some other things you may want to have handy. You may want to have current bank statements. What's the balances of your checking or your savings account? And again, this is as of the day that you are completing the form. So make sure right now, know that you may need to have this information handy before you sit down to do it. Have that information pulled up so that you have more accurate balances that are out there. Some other things, your asset information or your investment records. You want to talk about just some of those things as an overview, Ryan. You don't have to go into detail.
If you have a 529 plan, if you have a 529 account, if you have multiple properties, if you're like Tiffany, you got a house next to Tyler Perry down in Atlanta, you want to make sure you have that information as well too.
And a good thing about the 529 plans, something also that is slightly new this year. So if you have a 529 plan, if the student and or the parent have a 529 plan and you're required to list your investment information, that information is going to be listed under the parent's section of the FAFSA. However, if the parent has 529 plans for other children, they do not have to report those as investments or as assets this year, simply because FAFSA is only going to require it from the student for whom the FAFSA is being completed. So that is new this year. Something else you also want to have handy is child support. So child support payments will count for the most recently completed calendar year, and they will count as an asset as well. So as you're gathering your details, your information, key things, again, just about the FAFSA specifically, make sure you have your FSA IDs completed. Make sure you have key investment information that they may ask about. Balances of checking, savings accounts, your investment information as well. Values of small businesses, as well as your family farms. If you have an investment farm, so the family farm, will count as an investment, which is slightly different. So you want to subtract out the value of the home if, in fact, your family lives on your family's property is on the home. And all specific details on that can be found at studentaid.gov. So we're not going to dive too much into the specifics for that part, but we want to make sure that you know the key information may be needed.
Yeah.
Other part we want to talk about. We want to talk about some. Go ahead. No.
I also wanted to mention. Now, if you have multiple children, whoever the contributed parent is, that parent only needs to have one FAFSA ID. They do not need multiple IDs if they have multiple children. Now, each child has to have a separate FAFSA ID, just as an FYI.
Yeah, good point. And in addition to that, if you've already created your FSA ID, it's still the same FSA ID.
Correct. Yeah.
What I still recommend, though, is at least 2 to 4 days in advance, log in to make sure that you remembered what your password was. If you needed to reset anything, that you're doing that as still at least 2 to 4 days before you complete that FAFSA application.
Right. Yep.
Other things to keep in mind: there are deadlines with completing the forms. So the Department of Education has deadlines for the FAFSA. For the Pennsylvania State Grant, we also have deadlines that are out there as well as the schools. So schools have what we call sometimes priority filing deadlines. What we want to just tell everyone on here is research your deadlines and complete by the earliest of those deadlines. Also, keep in mind, because FAFSA has shifted and it's not opening until December, some of those deadlines may or may not be posted already on the school's websites. And if they're not, reach out to the school's financial aid offices to find out when, in fact, their priority filing deadlines are.
Yep. So just make sure you just double check the deadlines and make sure, I always say the early bird gets the worm. So again, like Tiffany said, research, and have your documentation all ready to go, so you don't miss any type of opportunity that will benefit you for your post-secondary endeavors.
Absolutely. And then what about those schools? We also want to make sure that the students are aware that the FAFSA will ask them to list the names of the schools that they're interested in attending. So they want to make sure they're
20
doing
schools this year. You can choose up to 20 schools this year on the FAFSA, as a FYI.
And keep in mind that only the schools that you list on the FAFSA will actually get the results of the FAFSA. So that if you do not list the names of these schools, they will not be able to let you know what you may or may not receive in financial aid. So it's important that you list those schools. Good thing is you do not have to have applied or even been accepted into the schools to list them on the FAFSA form. So good information there. For that student, though, who's still doing some research on those schools, maybe you haven't completely narrowed it down and you're still trying to figure it out. College fairs have begun. So, if you're in a high school and they're coming to your high school, make sure you take advantage of those opportunities to talk to the school representatives who are coming, ask them about their schools, always ask about financial aid options and scholarship information so that you can kind of maybe hone it down and select. Even still, if you're considering them, you're still listing them on the FAFSA application. But this is just to help you kind of figure it out and decide who you really want to list on there. Maybe it's a school that you weren't considering, and after talking to the school, there's now an interest. Well, go ahead and put them on the FAFSA application itself. College visits and even virtual tours are also a big thing as well. And I don't know, Ron, if you, not to put you on the spot, but when you all were doing college visits for your own personal reasons with your son, maybe 1 or 2 tips with narrowing down the schools. Could you give to our listeners?
A couple tips was make sure that the child is comfortable with the school, number one, and they can feel like that's their new home. And because I just feel like in our case, if he wasn't comfortable, he wasn't going to succeed. Secondly, we made sure that he reached out to the financial aid office outside of us being in the room. We wanted him to feel comfortable with him calling them to advocate on himself if he had any financial aid questions. So he had a one-on-one. Yep. He had a couple one-on-one calls with a couple financial aid folks via Zoom prior to him selecting the school he's at now, and he just felt comfortable because if he had financial aid questions, he can reach out to XYZ.
Right.
And lastly, yeah, he has some skin in the game. He definitely did. Lastly, it's very, very important that you express to them and you explain to them as parents the importance of deadlines, because not only are they going to have financial aid deadlines, they're going to have academic deadlines. So to start them early on, just understanding that, you can't wait around, this prompts them to be successful college students.
Good points. Thank you for sharing that part too. Not to put you on the spot, but I think that someone who's experienced it and who's kind of going through it, I think it's great for our listeners to kind of hear and get a feel.
I'm in the thick of it, as they would say, in the thick of it.
You're halfway through almost though, right?
Halfway.
All right. Another thing I think families can do right now, continue to look for those scholarships. So you can't complete the FAFSA application right now, but you can definitely still look for more financial aid in general. Key things, start looking at those scholarship applications, start applying, start gathering your information for that. Maybe you need some letter of recommendations. You can work on that right now. Maybe you need to work on an essay, draft one basic essay that you can just tweak from time to time, and then be ready with the information. Have all of your information handy, figure out how to go about getting your transcripts, how much advance notice someone needs, whether it's your counselor or someone else who's writing a letter of recommendation, how much advance notice do they need, and then be prepared to knock all of those things out for them.
And I like to mention this too, Tiffany. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's very important that the parents sit down with the child and tell them what they can afford, what they can't afford. Because if something happens, you lose a job, we go down to one income, or something happens. We went through COVID, we went through a pandemic. Things do change. It's important that you don't want to have to disrupt your child's their schooling based off of financial needs. So when the kids are looking at schools, explain to them, hey, this is how much it costs each year. Because some students just assume parents are rich.
And that's not always the
And
case in many
no, it's
households.
not always the case.
Then not do rely on some form of financial aid. So you mentioned a couple key points that I think it's really important to remember. And these are also things that students and families can do right now to be ready for the 24-25 application opening up. If they are aware right now that they've experienced some hardships, some special circumstances have happened with income, because they're going to be reporting about the 2022 income. But maybe right now, like you said, maybe there has been some unemployment, a loss of job, different things that have changed that information, changed their financial strength in the household. Now's a good time to start drafting some information, gathering your documentation so that you can reach out to the schools, reach out to FIA, share your situation with them, and ask them to take that into consideration before they process through, your financial aid package. Because otherwise, they're not going to know that there's something else going on right now. They're going to base it off of what they saw in 2022. So that's a good point. And the other part is, yes, it is very important for the students and their parents to have a healthy conversation on what's affordable for them in their household. What is their household plan, and come up with one. Maybe it's, hey, the student needs to really make sure they're looking for more scholarship opportunities. Check into some work study options. I always say a different school is your absolute last resort, but figure out if you do have to borrow some student loans, what does that look like? What will the monthly installments look like? Do some research that's out there. I think we have some great resources that are available. So I'm going to start to talk about just some of those resources. And again, if you think of some and I miss some, just by all means chime in. But key resources, studentaid.gov. Why? Because that's where you go to file the FAFSA application. Federal student aid is going to have a whole lot of information for students and families that they're going to start to push out just about this new 24-25 FAFSA and how to prepare. In addition to that, you can go ahead and complete your FSA IDs right then and there. FIA.org. We have a great website as well with lots of information, tools, publications that are available to households. Key thing I really think is really important right now, if you go to FIA.org, PHEAA.org/virtual, we have a lot of webinars that are out there to help students and families get ready. All of our webinars are also recorded. So we've done some in the past, one recently on scholarship searches. It's a great one to look into. There's one coming up in November on how to create that FSA ID. So if you've not created it and you're a little iffy about doing it, tune in, register for that webinar. And then there's another one coming out regarding financial aid called Financial Aid 101. In December, you can register for as well. And again, there are lots of other webinars that are taking place regarding student loans, our PA Forward program. So not to inundate everyone with all these details and resources, but we want to make sure that you don't just have to sit by idly waiting for the FAFSA to open up. You got some options and opportunities to actually go out there, get ready, gather all of your documents and your data, so that when it does open up, all you have to do is sit down, gather out about maybe 30 to 45 minutes, I'm thinking tops, and get ready to roll. Anything I've missed, Ron?
No, just as a FYI, FIA also has a lot of free publications as well. So if you're looking for any materials, go to FIA.org. Underneath our tools and resources, you can order our materials. They are free. They usually come between 2 to 3 business days. They're really fast turnover. So I always say 2 business days of actually you ordering them. And yeah, I think Tiffanie, you hit it right on the nose.
All right. And so again, for all of our listeners, thank you all for tuning in to the Higher Education Access Corner. Ron, it's always a pleasure having you on the Access Corner. Can't wait till the next time to have you back.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And again, for all of our listeners, thanks and tune in. We'll see you soon.